edition of the Crosstown Baseball Show. I'm your host, Anthony Schullo. With me, as always, is my friend and host, Anthony Romanelli. Anthony, we're back. It's another week. We're doing some more division previews. How are you feeling?
I'm doing well. Yeah, feeling good about it.
Feeling good about it. We did the AL and NL the AL and NL Central last week. This week, we're moving on actually to the East, and we're going to talk about the AL East and the NL East. And we're doing this, folks, because spring training, if you can believe it, is a mere 3 weeks away now. Yep. And with the new balance schedule here in Major League Baseball, for the first time ever, each MLB team will play the other MLB team. So it's a very unique time in the sport where you're not playing your division rival, 17, 18, 19 times, and you're playing everyone else around the league, which I don't know about you, Romanelli, but I like that a lot more than the playing your division opponent, 60% of the time.
Yeah, it's good for the game. It really is good for the game, for all the mistakes that Manfred makes. I think this is a good one. I couldn't care less about the pitch clock or the bases being bigger. I think it'll be fun for teams like the Cubs to play teams like Seattle, a team you would never, ever get to see otherwise. So I'm excited about that. I downloaded the schedule just the other day, and they're playing Seattle on the Cup, and they're playing everybody. So it's exciting for baseball. I'm glad that they've done it. I really am.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. One of my goals is to actually get. I'm sure yours is too, to get to every ballpark over the course of your life, and it makes this a lot easier, because if I'm going to another ballpark, I would love to see the Sox play in those ballparks. Right, and if I know that's going to happen, well, that's great. It makes it easier for me to travel to other parks.
Remind me, I'll count after we're done with this, but I think I'm at about 15 or 16 parks that I've been to already.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I actually think I'm almost up there. I think I'm about 12 or 13 myself. Yeah. We're going to have to, that's another episode right there, just like kind of rating our favorite parks that we've seen. So let's put a pin in that, because that'd be a good thing.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot.
A lot of good parks out there. Excellent. So let's just dive into it, folks. Like we did last week, we're going to do this in two parts today. Well, number one, we're going to go through the AL East first, and then we'll venture off into the NL East. We're going to talk about kind of where these teams fell at the end of 2022, and then we'll talk about some of the additions that each team had made for 23. As a reminder, these are just the moves that these teams have made up to now, right? I mean, we're still getting into February here shortly. Spring training's a couple weeks away. You see these teams make some last minute moves, minor league invites, minor league signings, what have you. So this is kind of what it looks like right now as we kind of paint the picture for what our teams are going to be facing both in the AL and the NL. So let's start with the AL East. And I will say, going into this conversation today, I was very excited about talking about the East and, quite frankly, the West too, because there's some really exciting teams. I think it's no secret that the Central divisions are duds right now. If it weren't for our teams, they would be quite boring.
Yes.
And when I look at the AL East standings, I'm immediately brought to the very top with the Yankees. The Yankees won that division last year, winning 99 games with a plus 240 run differential. That blows my mind. Yeah,
that's what is it? Toronto and Tampa Bay combined are only at, I think, 150 plus differential. So that's just insane. Daniel Tosh, the comedian, though, has referred to as the new Yankee Stadium as a joke because it's so small. And for a guy like Rizzo to hit as many home runs as he did, that's because his swing is perfect for that tiny right field front porch. That run differential is ridiculous, though.
It is.
Yeah, they should have won it all. I mean, you win by that many, you should just automatically win it all.
That's
why they play the games.
Right. We'll talk about that in a second because there's so much going on with that team. It's worth a discussion. But they did for all their warts, even though they hit the ball. We'll talk about this. They did win the division, and one thing to know is as we get into second and third place in the AL East here is the East divisions had 2 wildcard teams for each league. So the Blue Jays came in second, winning 92 games, got a wild card spot. Tampa Bay Rays, third place, 86. They got a wild card spot. And then, rounding out the bottom, the Orioles had a surprisingly solid season at 83 wins, only a negative 14 run differential. And then Boston Red Sox, they came in last place, winning 78 games, going 78 and 84. Now, here's what I'll say with the AL East division standings. 2 things to note. Number one, you can tell how strong this division is when you have 3 teams making the playoffs in the division. And 2, can we just note that the Red Sox came in last place in this division, winning 78 games. The Cubs won 74.
Right.
Perspective.
It's ridiculous. That's how strong the East actually is, and how bad the NL Central is. That I would not, speaking of, when we get to, well, since we're talking about them, I know we haven't gotten to players just yet, but I am still baffled why Justin Turner, I know it's all money. That's why he left. Why would you leave the Dodgers to go to a last place team in Boston to think that you're going to make that much of a difference to make them go from worst to first? That's not the division I jump to just for money. Those guys have enough money to last, generations already. And the fact that they want to leave winning teams and winning divisions just for the money is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up Justin Turner specifically, and that's a great example. It makes me wonder, honestly, if the Dodgers really wanted to have him back. I mean, you bring up the great point. Why would you leave? Kind of starting to wonder if he didn't really have a choice. I mean, the Dodgers, and we'll talk about them more next week, but they're a team that has kind of their infield is full at the moment. I kind of wonder if he didn't have a choice, which would make more sense than I think in our minds.
Yeah, you bring up something that maybe I hadn't thought of. So I don't know who's even playing third base for them now or who will be, but we'll look at that later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so the East division is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I would not want to be one of the teams. Imagine being like the Oakland A's, who might win 20 games if they're lucky this upcoming year. I just looked at their odds. It's something like 100 to, I don't know, it's like 100 to 1 or whatever to win the World Series. If not higher, like 1,000 to 1.
It's got to be higher than that, right?
Yeah.
Well, you bring up kind of my next point in that if what makes this division interesting to me, and of course I'm looking at it, so I'm talking about the AL, looking at it from the White Sox perspective, is for the Cubs and the Sox, they're both in the same boat where is the goal to win the division? Absolutely. Is the goal to get in the playoffs? Sure. But the problem is I need to see these teams be able to stand up to the likes of the Yankees and the Blue Jays. And this division alone, when I'm looking at the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Rays, all very good teams that have track records over the last 3 to 5 plus years that they're consistently making the playoffs. Whether it's, I don't care if they're ridden with injuries. I don't care if they have a couple bad starters, have a bad year. They are always there. And our teams have not mastered that consistency yet, like these teams.
I don't know what's wrong with Chicago sports as a collective whole. We're one of the top 5 cities in the country, and we can't find consistent ways to win in any sport. You had a mini dominant set of years with the Blackhawks. Now, when you talk Michael Jordan's Bulls, that was otherworldly. I mean, that's it. That was otherworldly. The same way with the Patriots and Tom Brady. That was that outside of that, though, the Yankees still always win. The Cardinals somehow still always win. All these teams always win. And again, the Cardinals are they're just a mid-market team, but their player development and everything else is impressive. And Toronto has been winning for a while now. Since Junior has shown up, they've started winning. Mm-hmm. I would give anything to be a fly on the wall in the Tampa Bay war rooms, for lack of a better term, how they continue to develop and make the playoffs year after year. It's still a newer franchise. I wouldn't consider them new anymore, but they do all the right things. They just do.
Yeah, I mean they seemingly do, and I want to give them credit for it, right? And there's just part of me that, when I look at what Tampa Bay specifically has done in the last few years, they're the type of team that they really rely heavily on their development team, and they're not one to sign players to big bucks. I mean, obviously they gave Wander Franco that huge $13-14 million deal, but other than that, right before they get through their arbitration years, they often let their players, trade them off. They did that with Blake Snell. They did that with a number of other guys. And like, at what point does that just wear off? Like, at what point does that just not work? I got to think it's coming soon for them.
I would think so too. I equate the Pirates, the Royals, for a long time, the Rays, as MLB player development teams. And as soon as they got good, boom, they were gone. Yeah. But Tampa Bay keeps hanging around. And if you look, yes, third place, but they were still a plus 52 run differential. They made the playoffs again. That front office just knows what they're doing. They just do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, proof's in the pudding. So we'll see what they do next year. As far as things look now, I mean, very, very, very big chance that they're sustainable. What I do want to talk about, before we leave the standing screen here is, I want to talk a little bit about these Orioles. I think you and I have had kind of offhand comments about how just very surprising this team was last year. And if there's any team I'm excited to watch in the AL other than my White Sox, it's this team.
I would agree with you. I went and saw them when they played the Cubs this past year, and they were on, I think, an 8 or 9 game. The Orioles were on an 8 or 9 game winning streak at the time. And that's when I was like, they could catch Tampa.
Yeah.
Catch Tampa. And they were, and you could see every player was kind of just puffing their chest a little more or running a little harder. And the Cubs were deflated because they were playing a team in the Orioles that had won 8 or 9 in a row at that time. And the Cubs hadn't, done anything last year, the last 2 years. But last year specifically when they played the Orioles, that game was fun to watch with a pair of Oriole glasses on because they were running on all cylinders. I am excited to see what they do this year. If they can turn their run differential around just a little, look, that's a 3-game difference between them and Tampa. And maybe they make the playoffs and Tampa falls. Yeah, well, I'm kind of rooting. I'm going to be watching them from the outside team. They will be.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. You said, they're 3 games behind Tampa, and that could be the difference next year. And I mean, quite frankly, that 3 games was that 3-game gap with the wild card. I mean, they were 3 games out of the wild card. You imagine if the Rays just slip a little bit and the Orioles can maintain that trajectory, they can find themselves in a playoff spot. And if you look at that roster too, like this is a roster of, first off, very young, kind of first couple picks in the draft guys that are finally hitting the majors. Adley Rutschman, that catcher, is bound to be kind of one of the best catchers of baseball over the next 5 to 10 years. Yep. You have Gunnar Henderson, that their number 1 prospect shortstop, who's going to be making his major league debut this year, no doubt about it. Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, Ryan Mountcastle. If you've never heard of these guys, look them up because they had impressive seasons last year, those that played in the majors. And these are all young guys. They're all sub 26, 25. I mean, they can be set up to be a really good team for years. But again, here's the problem. they're not in the Central divisions. They're in a division with the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and it's almost like if I'm an Orioles fan, I'm going, great, we're good, but Jesus, this is tough. Like, how the hell are we going to do this in this division?
Right. Yep. As a mid to small market team, it's impossible. But being a Cubs fan my whole life, rooting for the underdog my whole life, man, am I rooting for them to just get in. That should, for teams like Baltimore, for teams like maybe even the Cubs this year. I know we're not talking about their division, but just get in, figure out a way to get in, and then see what happens.
And that's key though, because when the playoffs expanded and included two more teams essentially from each league, we've seen it last year with the Phillies. They were the lowest seed in the NL, made it to the World Series. All rules, there are no rules once you get in, right? Anything can happen. And so I know that you and we're kind of going to contradict ourselves here in a second, but I just said earlier, hey, if the Cubs and the Sox get in, I don't know about their competitiveness against these other teams. And while that is true to a degree, it can also be true that once the Cubs and the Sox get in, it's possible.
It is possible. If they run on all the right cylinders, if Bellinger plays out of his mind to get his bigger money for another 2 or 3 years somewhere else, because he's not going to be around long. He signed the 1 year. So we'll see. It'll be really interesting. I am curious. I know they've mentioned this in the past, and this is a little aside, but the idea of additional travel. I remember there being issues with, like, after the Cubs had won, they were talking about all the travel that they had to do, like the year following, like they were the team that traveled the most, or one of the top 3 teams that traveled the most, or whatever. And they used that as an excuse. I'll be curious with every team playing every other team, how much that will make a difference in how managers manage with days off, with travel days. I am real curious.
That's an interesting point. I never really looked at it from that perspective, but I mean, yeah, if you're going to the West Coast a little more, that's a hike. I mean, that's completely reasonable. One thing I wanted to ask you about before we talk about kind of the impact additions that these AL East teams made, let's talk about the Red Sox, because I just am totally befuddled, for lack of a better word, at what has come of that team, and I'm still trying to piece it together in my brain, if I'm being honest.
Same. I think that they have lost their direction. They have no true leadership. I think management doesn't know what it's doing anymore. I think I don't know if the players don't want to play there anymore. I don't know if their drive is there anymore as a team. I don't know. But they just did not look good. Even though, they didn't even break 80 games. They weren't fun to watch. They weren't talked about very much, to be honest with you. And I don't see them not being in the last place again.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah. I just don't. The way the Orioles, how they ended the year, Tampa again, Toronto again, the Yankees, like, come on. If you look at those top 3 teams, you've got, 240 and 140. Oh, my God. Just run differentials just between those 3 teams. And how is Boston going to even compete? I don't see them even competing this year.
No, I don't either. And I kind of want to revisit them as we talk about the AL East editions here. So why don't we transition to talking about that and talk about kind of line by line here, kind of what these teams added over this offseason thus far. And so we'll start obviously going 1st to 5th. We'll start with the Yankees. The Yankees really made one impact addition, old friend of mine, Carlos Rodon. I mean, I was bummed when the Sox let go of him. I know they don't want to pay him all that money. He obviously signed a short-term deal with the Giants, went ahead and now signed with the Yankees, making, ton of money, but I think it's about end up being 25 or 26 million a year.
Yeah.
That's what the Yankees needed. If they needed anything, they just needed to stabilize their pitching, and what better guy to do it than a hard-throwing left-hander in Carlos Rodon.
Yep, I would completely agree with you. I think once they got Judge to sign the dotted line, everything else was almost a foregone conclusion. They needed that one additional solid pitcher. They got it in Rodon. Again, it looks like they'll probably run away with the East just based on the strength that they continue to have. It's, been that way our entire lives. The Yankees have always competed. And I see no reason why they don't not only compete, but win the division running away again.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. I have an existential baseball fan question for you, because I think about this a lot with the Yankees. What would you rather have? Would you rather have 15 losing seasons and one of the 15 is a World Series win, or that is locked in, guaranteed, one's coming, you just don't know when? Or would you rather have the Yankees, where your team is going to get in the playoffs 15 straight years, and there's like a 50% chance you win maybe 2 or 3 World Series? Because this is what this team is. They're at the playoffs, but these fans are still, they haven't had enough. They get the playoffs every year, but the Yankees can't pull off a World Series win. They haven't for some time. Which one would you rather have?
Again, because we are talking about the Cubs and Sox on a weekly basis, and, born and raised with the misery of being Cubs and White Sox fans from birth, the euphoria that I felt for that one win, I can still tell you exactly where I was standing when Rizzo caught the last out. I can tell you exactly where I was standing. I was less than a foot from my TV. I was less than a foot from my television. And then I screamed and I dropped to my knees. And that type of euphoria is legitimately once in a lifetime. That was a bucket list item of which I had zero control over.
Correct.
Would I rather have that than being that close like the Yankees all the time? I don't know.
That's a tough question. And I didn't expect a clear answer, but I pose that question because I want everyone to understand, and it's important for us to understand that, yes, I agree with you. The Yankees are most likely to win this division. I put my money on them, but it is not a sure thing. They've gotten to the playoffs year after year after year, and it's been a while since they've won a World Series, and they can't seem to get there. So if I'm a Yankees fan, I understand, because I'd be frustrated too. Like it's almost a tease, if you will, to get there every year and still not be able to win it all.
Yeah. It is a tease, because it's almost as if I don't want to say true Yankees fan, because a true Yankees fan is going to watch them all year. But your sideline Yankees fans won't start watching until the playoffs even begin. Like they won't watch any part of the season. Then they'll pick it up right near the end, maybe the last 2 weeks, just to make sure they get in, and then jump on the bandwagon like everybody else.
Correct.
So that part I don't like as somebody who is a true fan. I can say with complete honesty, I was a Walter Payton fan growing up. Was I a Bears fan? I was a Walter Payton fan. So to watch Walter Payton as a child and then finally watch him get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl and be super excited for him was, again, ultimately once in a lifetime, because the Bears they went in 06, but they didn't win. But I don't make it I don't watch them every Sunday. I'm not. I'm a Bears fan. I'm a couch Bears fan, kind of. But I would consider myself, like over here as a Bears fan, even though I've lived here. So it's hard to be a Yankee fan, I think, and not be all in. I think it's almost like a bloodline thing. I'm guessing if your parents and grandparents and great grandparents were Yankees fans, that's how it happened for me as a Cubs fan, especially having been born more on the South side than the North side. I should be a Cubs fan by birth. So I think all these Yankees fans expect it because it's all they know. The same way for decades and decades and decades. That's all the Cubs knew was losing. And then the Red Sox win, and you're like, oh, yay, they've won. And I actually feel like with the Cubs right now, they're almost in that Red Sox rebuild mode where they're, okay, we did it once. Now we're doing it again. We think, like with you and I having gone to the convention, and the Cubs are almost underlyingly saying 23 is we're building, but 24 we're going for, is what I'm feeling and hearing. The Yankees just go for it all the time. They just do. They have the money. So do the Cubs. We know they have the money. The $3.8 billion that they made proves to us that they have them. They do have the money. So could they have done what the Mets owner had done? We'll talk about the NL East in a bit. Yeah, they could have, but they chose not to.
Well, should they need reinforcements at the trade deadline, the Yankees are going to be no strangers spending the money to do it.
Correct.
So let's go ahead and go through the rest of the additions for the East. We're moving on to the Blue Jays. They added first baseman Brandon Belt. They added outfielder Kevin Kiermaier, the brother of the head groundkeeper at Wrigley Field, which I think is always funny.
Yeah, me too.
Starting pitcher Chris Bassett they added, and then they traded with the Arizona Diamondbacks for outfield Dalton Varsho. Tampa Bay was very light so far this offseason. They really only added impact pitcher Zach Eflin, who played for the World Series participating Philadelphia Phillies.
Yep.
The Baltimore Orioles added former Cub Michael Given, the relief pitcher. Second baseman Adam Frazier, starting pitcher Kirk Gibson, starting pitcher Cole Irvin, and former White Sox catcher James McCann. The Red Sox did make some additions, nothing too flashy. The flashiest was they added Japanese outfielder Masataka Yoshida, closer Kenley Jansen, third baseman Justin Turner, which we've already talked about, Corey Kluber, veteran starting pitcher, outfielder Adam Duvall, and outfielder Raimel Tapia. So, really, there's nothing that jumps out of the page with any of these teams for me. It really, and that's not surprising, right? We're looking at teams that most of these teams in the AL East were competitive in 2022, were solid teams, and these teams are basically kind of reinforcing around the edges, if you will, to make sure that they're successful in 23.
Yeah. I like and knew about the addition of Yoshida, the addition of Corey Kluber with a solid starting pitcher with his reputation. That's fantastic. But I also think they took a step back in taking Adam Duvall. I'm like, it does nothing for me. For the step up with Kluber, or the to solidify a rotation by using Kluber was a good move, and hoping he still got enough left in his tank. But the addition of Adam Duvall actually made me laugh out loud. I was like, that's not no. So I don't see much upward progress for the Red Sox this year. I just don't.
I would agree with you. I think Duvall by no means a splashy name. I think the highlight of the offseason, which I didn't put here because he was previously on the team, was their contract extension with Rafael Devers. And quite frankly, if I'm a Red Sox fan, that needed to happen. They let Mookie Betts walk. They let Xander Bogaerts walk. They let Andrew Benintendi walk now on the White Sox. I mean, they needed to hang on to one of their homegrown players, and they committed to Devers over the offseason essentially a 10-year, or turned into, an 11-year kind of $313 million contract. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. So it starts in 2024. It's a 10-year deal, $313 million, where he's making upwards of average annual value of about $33 million a year. I mean, that's a lot of money for their young player, but here's the problem. They better start building around him quickly.
If you recall, the Cubs were in talks to get him. They just, and again, you and I have talked about the idea of anything in double digits commitment wise is absolutely insane for a baseball player. It just is. So I don't blame them for not going after him. But to your point about Quickly is right, because again, Yankees, they're never going to go down. They're just never going to. As long as Vlad is with Toronto, they're not going anywhere. Tampa continues to prove themselves. I think the one team that has to prove that they belong back in the NL East is Boston. I think they've fallen very hard, very quickly.
Yeah. And
outside of signing him for Devers for that multi-year contract, he's by himself. He's on an island, and they better figure something out in a hurry.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say about the Red Sox, and what's painful for their fans right now, is they last offseason signed, of course, Trevor Story, one of the big shortstops, to play second base for them, to a huge deal.
Yeah.
He's going into the season injured. He's going to be needing surgery, and he's not going to be starting the season with that team. Kind of no word on how long he's going to be out. But yeah, this team has a lot of aches and pains, a lot of holes. And right now, as we can see, looking at the AL East, and we'll wrap it up this way, we have three teams that we know are going to be around: the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and the Rays. But I think if the Cubs and Sox this year find themselves playing the Orioles here in Chicago or at Camden Yards, that's not going to be an easy game either.
No, not at all. I think they put themselves on the map last year. The Orioles, they've put themselves on the map as a team to be reckoned with. And like I said, I think you and I are both quietly rooting for them to make some serious noise and make the playoffs.
Absolutely. The first games that the Cubs and the Sox play against the AL East, the Cubs actually looks like they will be playing the first AL East team, the Tampa Bay Rays. They'll be playing them in a series at home May 29th through 31st. And then for the Sox, the first game they have against the AL East will, in fact, be the Orioles, April 14th through 16th. So you bet your ass I'll be there for two of those games, because I just want to see them play the Orioles. I love to see some good young players kind of whacking the ball around. Guaranteed radio. Excellent. So let's move on to the NL East. Let's go ahead and pull up those NL East standings for 2022. Of course, as always, we're starting at the top. Now, the top of this division was very interesting, because you had Atlanta walking away with the first spot, winning the division with 101 wins and 61 losses with a plus 180 run differential. But the Mets were right there with them, 101-61. The only reason how this works, the only reason the Atlanta Braves won the division is because they had the better record against the division, against the Mets. Therefore, they got that first spot. But then rounding it out, we have the Phillies that were in third place. They made it as a wild card team along with the Mets. They won 87 games, still had that positive run differential. And here in the basement, they had the Marlins at 69 wins. And then the Nationals were the worst team in baseball last year with a measly 55 wins, 107 losses with a negative 252 run differential, which is just the exact opposite of the Yankees. That's an astonishing number. So that rounds out the NL East in 2022.
Yeah. Watching Atlanta and New York battle for the last couple of weeks was a lot of fun. Personally, I was rooting for Atlanta just because I've always liked. I mean, I'm talking about going back to my days of like watching Dale Murphy play.
Yeah,
I loved him. So I was kind of rooting for Atlanta, and I've got some friends who live in Atlanta. So it was good to see them win. It really was. I think the Mets took it. Well, clearly they took it personally and took it hard because of all the money that they've spent to now ultimately try and buy a championship, almost the way the Yankees do every year. Now it's just going to see which team can which New York team can spend more, so it can be
Right.
their division or their version. I'm sorry, their version of the Subway Series. Ultimately, that's all that and it's, I don't know if this is rude to say, that's all they want, the Yankees and Mets is, and I think that's all ESPN wants.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's good TV, good action, and you
Yep.
know what? I'll say this: whatever happens with that team or whatever game they're on, Alex Rodriguez is going to be the color analyst on those games.
I cannot stand. Oh, I have said it in the past, and I'll say it here now. On record, when he is announcing a game with God as my witness, my vinyl collection gets more playtime. Swear to God, I mute.
Terrible.
I mute. Oh. And it's not his fault that his voice is the way it is. I have a face for radio. Alex Rodriguez has a voice for, oh my God, I don't know, to wake the dead. I don't know, just that whine.
It's not just the voice though. Like, I wonder sometimes the things he says, I'm like, did you play baseball? Like, are you sure? Like, I'm just so confused.
Well, I will equate that to not being used to being put on the spot. Yes, they did, but they're not natural announcers. And so some of the times, some of those guys, what they say, you're like, what did you just say? But then they're put on the spot and they don't know what to say because they weren't expecting it or whatever. I'm barely going to give him the benefit of that doubt because at this point, he has been doing it long enough that he shouldn't be that put off by any comment or any question because he grew up in the game, talks about the game 24/7, 365 since he was 10 years old. So he shouldn't be as put off as he is. And actually to that point, Steve Stone and his partner just got their extensions, didn't they? I really like him.
Yes. You know what? I'm glad you brought it up because dumb me, we opened the show and I was like, oh, nothing big happened for the Sox. Wow. Clearly I missed something huge. Yeah. Jason Benetti. Jason Benetti.
Benetti. Yeah. I really like him a lot.
Oh, you know what? I'll tell you what. And number one, I'm with you. I mean, he is by far my favorite play-by-play guy ever. First, only really close first and second. My second is Len Casper. When he came to the White Sox, I was the happiest guy on the face of the earth. I love that man.
When Len left, I was legitimate. I was like, what the hell else could go wrong? A buddy of mine and I were at a game and Len was leaving the stadium and we caught him and we talked to him for a couple minutes and somewhere in the world is a picture of with me and my buddy with Len Casper, just the nicest guy ever, super passionate about the game. And that's when I knew when Casper left the Cubs, I'm like, something's wrong on the north side because there can't be more than 5 absolute golden gem broadcast jobs in baseball. There can't be than being an announcer at Wrigley Field. There you had Vin Scully for, until he died, basically. I mean, to this day, you say the name Vin Scully, I get goosebumps. To this very moment, I'm getting them now. You had Jack Buck in St. Louis. You had Harry Carey in St. Louis and Chicago. And to have Len Casper in Chicago go from one side, from the north side, which is, to me, the dream job in all of baseball, to leave to go to the White Sox. You went to the White Sox. Like, to me,
all right.
And all right. I know. But that's like, And again, that's no different than, when a Yankee player or vice versa, like with Contreras going to the Cardinals, it's the same. You're like, what the hell? Or how often when Johnny Damon went from the Red Sox to the Yankees, you're like, dude,
yes,
you don't do that. You don't do that. So that's what it felt like when Casper left. But I get it. I mean, he wanted to do radio. So I'm happy for him. And, he's been seeing good baseball lately, except for the last year.
Yeah. But hey, it's true. But needless to say, I'm thrilled to have him. It's fun. It's fun to listen to him radio, TV.
Really like him.
God, he's just such a great guy. But yeah, thanks for reminding me, Romanelli. Jason Benetti, the Sox play-by-play on the TV side. Steve Stone, incredible analyst who's had time with both the Cubs and the Sox. Both were extended to all we know is multi-year contract extensions. Yeah. So
I'm happy for both of them. I always liked Steve Stone. I missed him when he left, but you knew why. Again, that's the Reinsdorf loyalty. Why he went back to the Sox. That just is. That is what it is. And I've always liked Steve Stone. So I'm super happy to listen to those games. Actually, I just couldn't stand, or still can't stand, AJ when he's on national broadcasts.
Yeah, those are rough too.
Yep. And I know, and AJ's pretty smart. He really is. But just not a big fan.
No, I'm not either. I'm not a big fan of just the personality in general, but that's neither here or there. So going back to the NL East, because, hey, folks, in this show, we are tangents aplenty, so get used to it. So, and the NL East, what I will say here is, before we get to the impact additions for the NL East, this is, I think, in a very unique way, very similar to the AL East. And here's why I say this, is because obviously you have your big dogs in the Braves, the Mets, the Phillies. We'll talk about who they added here in a moment. Those three are going to be the top players in their division, but don't sleep on the Marlins. They are the Orioles of the NL East. I wouldn't be surprised if they get 75 wins this year.
Okay. What I mean by that is the Orioles had those 75 wins still don't get you excited enough to where they're on the verge of making the playoffs. No. The Orioles, I think that's why, at least for me, that's why I'm going to be the outside fan for the Orioles, because they have a legitimate chance now of making the playoffs. Like I said, they put themselves on the map. By the Marlins getting 4 more wins, you're still not putting yourself on the map.
No, I don't think they'll put themselves on the map by any means.
So they'll be as good as the Cubs were last year, which was awful.
Yes, but what I mean by that is, when you look at, when you put all these teams together and you think, okay, who's going to be over 75 wins? Most people are going to say Marlins aren't on that list, and I could see why you say that. I think of all of the lower bottom of the barrel of this league, I think the Marlins are the top of that bottom barrel. I think they're going to surprise some people and have more wins than you think.
So they may have a fish or two poking its head out of the barrel?
Correct. That's a very appropriate and spot-on analogy talking about the Marlins. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I use my Tommy Boy David Spade fish in a barrel analogy.
Love it. Also, great family film.
Yes.
I do this thing. I'm pretty sure people are annoyed by it. No matter what film people quote or talk to me about, it could be a Disney movie, it could be Saw, it could be Wolf of Wall Street. I'll say great family film. Pisses people. Shut up, Anthony. Schindler's List, great family film. All right, folks. So that is the NL East standings. Let's move over to talk about what the heck these teams did over the offseason thus far. Obviously, we'll start with the Braves. They made a really solid trade with the Oakland Athletics and brought in their catcher, Sean Murphy, and then extended him. Fantastic. They also brought in relief pitcher Nick Anderson.
Before you get to before you get to the Yankees, the Mets, since we are, our origin is Cubs Sox, you said something very quickly that you didn't even realize you said, and extended him.
Yeah.
The Cubs have a problem extending their play.
Yes.
Remember, they still haven't extended Hap. They still haven't extended Nico. And spring training, I almost said spring break. Spring training is only 3 weeks away. I'm telling you, dude,
I'm right there with you.
God, swear word.
That is their imperative. Is you need it. Two of those would be great. We've been talking about this for weeks. Happen, Nico, sign me up. If you don't walk away with at least one of those extended, I think Romanelli is going to take a 3-week hiatus off the show and vacation somewhere far away.
Yeah,
because
I'm just gonna put this up and just leave it here, and then you're just gonna talk for the full hour, and that way our fans who will tell other fans this. Because I won't be here because I'll be too pissed.
So I'm going to talk to your beautiful subscribe on YouTube sign. Great. Okay.
I could get one of the cats to hold it.
That would be
one of my cats is right here. He's literally right here. But I don't. But he's sleeping, and if I wake him, I'll have hell to pay later. So.
Yeah. Well, let's not do that. So yes, extended is right. The Atlanta Braves extend literally everybody. I think they extended the hot dog guy. I mean, they extend everybody. So the Mets had a really good offseason, as we all know. Signed starting pitcher Justin Verlander, starting pitcher Jose Quintana, as we both know well. They had a Japanese signing in Kodai Senga, who was a kind of a top of the rotation starting pitcher. Outfield Tommy Pham, and then another player we both know well, a relief pitcher David Robertson.
Yep.
The Phillies inked excellent shortstop Trey Turner, who was on the Cubs list at 1.2.
Yep.
They also signed our good buddy Craig Kimbrell, who played for both the Cubs and the Sox, starting pitcher Tawan Walker. The Marlins signed breakout player last year for the Sox, Johnny Cueto, infielder Gene Segura from the Phillies. And then I'm very happy they took Luis Arias from the Twins. And then to round it out, the Nationals acquired Alex Colomé, former White Sox closer, first baseman Dominic Smith, and infielder Heimer Candelario, former Cubs. So a lot of former Cubs and Sox on this list. What stands out to you here, Romanelli?
As you know, watching the White Sox from the outside, I have always said this about Johnny Cueto. He was intimidating to me. I'm surprised the White Sox let him go. He intimidated me in Cincy. He intimidated me when he was with, was it San Diego? Is that the other place?
He was in San Francisco.
San Francisco, thank you. He's just an intimidating presence to me on the mound. And for the White Sox to have let him go is somewhat bothersome, because if the White Sox are going to continue to get stronger, I think they needed him. Now, does Cueto get the Marlins up to the 75 win mark? Maybe. But if I'm Cueto, again, some of these guys in the moves, and to your point, we don't know the backstories. So we don't know why Josh Turner went to Boston. Like, was he asked to, asked to resign kind of thing? Because, hey, we're not going to be using you or wanting you anymore. So that's why he went to sign with Boston. Again, Cueto. And then the other comment I wanted to make was, Tommy Pham, didn't he play for the Cardinals?
He did way back.
Yeah,
yes.
And he was a pain in the Cubs' behind. So with the addition of Verlander and Quintana, and having seen Tommy Pham as much as I have as a Cub fan, he can be a stickler and a difficult out to get when he's at the plate. So there's a lot of additions here from the north and or south side in some regard that I'm associating with that. The Mets obviously made the biggest splash, but I like that signing of Tommy Pham, and I know that's minor, But I'm telling you, he could be a pain in the butt. And I was just surprised by the Cueto going to the Marlins. It just surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly some surprising ones in here. I think it's very evident, and something that is going to I can't help when we're talking about the NL East to always just bring up Steve Cohen and the Mets. I think it's going to fundamentally change the way teams look to structure their teams, how they spend their money, because I'm kind of torn, to be honest, as a baseball fan, because I think you and I both know, we talked about it before, that we love this game, and there's half of our being that says these players make far too damn much money for throwing and catching a ball. And that's half of it, which is true. But the other half is, if I'm a Mets fan, it's not my money. Go ahead and spend it, because I want to. When I come to a ball game, I want to see a bunch of stars perform well and win ball games. And so, I would love that. And I have two parts of myself that compete against each other, and I'm interested to see how his spending, Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, how his spending either jumpstarts other owners or makes other owners come after him to insert new rules that avoid spending like that in the future.
Yeah, it will be interesting because, I mean, really, Steinbrenner was the one who started that.
Yeah.
George Steinbrenner, who started that, win at all costs mentality. So would just buy and buy and buy. So it will be interesting. I think it'll depend on how well the Mets do, because if he spends all that money and they fall apart, then they become the laughing stock.
Right.
So if they spend all that money and win, that just reinforces what you said way early in one of our podcasts, one of our first podcasts. You have to spend money to make money. And we all know that. But I think you mentioned that specifically relating to the Sox. And the same with the Cubs, seeing that the Cubs were, the fifth richest franchise with $3.8 billion, but the White Sox weren't even in the top 10 or 15. As a Cubs fan, that bothers me that you won't spend the money. As a White Sox fan, you're happy that Reinsdorf isn't spending money that he knows isn't going to help his team. But at the same time, you don't want to go to a park and watch minor league baseball. If I'm going to do that, I'll go watch the King County Cougars.
Right. It's very interesting. And we saw this with the last collective bargaining agreement when they had the lockout, all the things that kind of what coalesced from there. And I think this is something that when that collective bargaining agreement runs out in 5 or 6 years, this will definitely be a topic of conversation. But having said that, it's clear cut in this division who's the leader of the pack, and I think you'll see the Braves and Mets up there again. And I'm excited to watch those games. I think when both the Braves, when the Sox are playing, and we'll go over this in a second, when the Sox are playing either the Braves or Phillies or the Mets at home, I'm going to be catching those games. But as for the Cubs, again, another example of, if they're going to a division series or a championship series against the Mets or the Braves, I can't bet on them. Wow. I mean, they're not ready for that level of competition.
No, they're not even close. And I don't know that they're going to get there. I think, if they're close at the trade deadline and they can make a jump or two or, get somebody, God help them, but they don't have it yet. I can't even think of the words, but they're not there yet. They're just not.
No. Well, we all know that they're not there yet, and we'll see, and that'll be the ultimate test. Once you start winning against teams like these, the top of the NL East, then we're talking actual competitive play. They'll win you a World Series. So we go to the Cubs schedule here. The first games that they have against the NL East this year is against the Marlins at Miami, April 28th through the 30th. And then the first games that the White Sox have against the NL East are actually April 17th through 19th at home versus the Phillies. So I'm going to have to catch one of those. So I think that's it for today, folks. We had a great overview of the NL East. Next week, we wrap up our division previews, we go out west, California. Here we come. We're going to the AL West and the NL West to see what's going on there in the Western time zone. Just a reminder before we let you go, folks, please subscribe, like, follow. Anthony, where's the sign? Where is it? Boom, there it is. So
you shall receive.
Bingo. There you go. Please subscribe, folks. Like I said, the best way to follow us is on YouTube, I think, because you get the visual, you get the video podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe for updates, comment, and like our stuff. Of course, you can always find us, our audio version of the podcast, anywhere you get your podcast. So thanks for joining us this week here on the Crosstown Baseball Show. We'll see you next week. Go White Sox.
Go Cubs.
Take care.
See ya.